Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Medical Center Hour. I'm Marcia Day Childress from the Center for Biomedical Ethics and Humanities, and we're pleased to see all of you here today for what is essentially part 2 of our programs about cancer care at UVA. This is a program entitled Healing by Design, the Emily Couric Clinical Cancer Center. The UVA Cancer Center, as you know, is about to open its new clinical cancer facility, the Emily Couric Clinical Cancer Center, a facility described by some experts, including our own Cancer Center Director and our medical school dean, as the most remarkable clinical facility they've ever seen. All of us who walk or drive along Jefferson Park Avenue have daily followed the construction of this building for a couple of years now, watching its glass walls rise to catch the light, and wondering what its interior spaces look like and how they will work for patients, families, and clinicians. We don't have much longer to wait. The building's dedication is just a couple of weeks away on the 26th of February, and the building will open to patients in April. Our Medical Center Hour last week offered a very quick tour of the history of cancer care at UVA, a tour you can still make by purchasing the book, A Century of Cancer Care at UVA, produced through historical collections at the Health Sciences Library here. The UVA bookstore is here again today with copies of the book for sale. Today, in our session called Healing by Design, we preview the new structure, our future, by focusing on the building's design, which takes its cues from new and revived understandings of how persons best heal from life-threatening illness and take the best possible care of one another. We welcome as our speakers today the building's lead architect, its lead landscape architect, and its medical director, who together will demonstrate how facilitating healing of the body and the spirit and fostering the best caregiving are integral to the Emily Couric Clinical Cancer Center's design and are quite literally built into the structure and into all of the building's spaces, including its gardens and its terraces. Richard Clarke, who's seated in the middle, is the design principal at Zimmer Bunsul Frasca Architects, ZGF, of New York and Washington, D.C. He's the building's lead designer. Roger Courtenay, on my far right, Vice President and Principal Senior Landscape Architect at AECOM in Alexandria, Virginia, is responsible for design of the facility's gardens and terraces, inside and out. Our own Peyton Taylor, on my immediate right, GYN oncologist and medical director of the Cancer Center, has been in so many ways the architect's partner in dreaming, designing, and constructing the Emily Couric Clinical Cancer Center. And he knows the structure and its spaces inside out, as few of us ever will. These will be our tour guides today, and since we're in here and not across the street, no hard hats are required. The idea that design and health go together and that good design can make for better health and better health care is one founding principle of our School of Architecture's Center for Design and Health, co-directed by Professors Ruben Rainey and Tim Beatley. We're pleased that today's program is a partnership with the Center for Design and Health, and we offer special deep thanks to Ruben Rainey. And now we'll start our tour with Peyton Taylor. Thank you.
Marcia, thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here today and to just introduce our real speakers, Mr. Clarke and Mr. Courtenay. I don't think I need to remind anyone in the room that the diagnosis of cancer is very traumatic and is very stressful, both for patients and their families. It forces us to confront our mortality, and it forces us to view our most intimate relationships from a different perspective. And for most people, it's a transformational experience. The journey after the diagnosis is arduous. We firmly believe that receiving care in an extraordinary environment can help ease the physical, emotional, and spiritual stress of our patients. Healing, caring, and curing are all important elements of our journey. The Emily Couric Clinical Cancer Center is a major step forward toward achieving this goal. It's an exceptional place, and I think when you see it, you will all agree. It is designed for tomorrow and for many years to come. Everything about the building, places our patients and their families at the center of the experience. They are first. It allows them to receive very sophisticated medical care in an environment that I would describe as inspirational, comfortable, physically and spiritually supportive. Our robust Healing Arts program adds additional value to our commitment. It has been a rare privilege to be involved in this project from its very conception. And if you don't mind an obstetrical metaphor, the gestation period for this baby has really been a long one. In 1997, a national architectural planning firm met with us and choreographed a detailed self-study program. We then assembled a planning team and subsequently a design team, and we were each determined to get it right. The process was convoluted, and as only university processes can go, involved many, many people, patients and their families, to listen to them and to design programs and facilities that were both convenient, respectful, and supportive as possible while still delivering technologically sophisticated care. It involved health professionals, more than 120 nurses, physicians, education, support staff specialists, got together to craft the best working environment to make sure that all the things that they needed to provide good care were in place and included. Members of our community focus groups, police services, fire services, security services, to help us understand their needs and to make it easy for them to help us should we need them. And donors, to believe that our project was a noble one and who have very generously supported us. And without them, this dream would not have been realized. After years of preparatory work, we sought an experienced and creative architectural firm to translate these dreams and concepts and to integrate them into a beautiful yet highly functional building. We had proposals from all over the United States and from UK, very experienced firms, and we selected the very creative and experienced firm ZGF, Zimmer Bunsul Frasca, based on their presentation and their past work. It was a great decision. ZGF then led a small design team to both coasts of the United States to look at other well-designed cancer centers, and we could learn from them firsthand which design elements were useful and which were weak points. We imposed on ZGF the usual quantitative needs for a professional building. The number of square feet, how many exam rooms, what kind of equipment, how many sinks we needed. All of those quantitative elements had to be integrated into this building. And we imposed on our landscape architects some very special challenges. The site, as you go by Lee Street, is a wedge. It's bounded on one side by a working rail line. The vibrations from that play havoc with the sensitive equipment we have in the building. We had to transform that entrance on JPA to a gateway to a new health system and a new architecture. The expansion project had to dovetail with the cancer center. And also, we wanted the gardens, the healing gardens, inside and outside the building were special design constraints. In addition, the university made the wise decision that it would be a LEED certified building. It would be environmentally sensitive, which posed additional design challenges. And lastly, but importantly, we had qualitative issues that we wanted to present to the architectural firm. We all wanted to create the right type of space, and we used a series of adjectives to describe our dream. We wanted it to be inspirational. We wanted it to be open. We wanted it to be collaborative. We wanted it to be peaceful. We wanted it to be supportive. We wanted it to feel secure, and yet we wanted to convey the future. So that was a real challenge, and I can say in this area of the building, our working relationship with both the architects and the builders was very critical, and it was a tremendous success. And it's with great pleasure that I get to introduce the speakers. We've already heard their credentials, but Mr. Clarke is going to go first and is our design principal, and Mr. Roger Courtenay is the landscape architect design principal. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Peyton. That was a wonderful preface, and actually before we get into content, reflecting on Peyton's words, you know, a great project is really something that's wrought and becomes part of its community in every way, shape, and form, part of its institution, part of the medical center, part of the campus, part of the broader community. And I think what distinguishes this project really has to do with the participation of so many people. So in many ways, I feel like I'm representing a gigantic team, hundreds of people, ranging from the contractors. Gilbane has done a fantastic job, and the people within the university, David Newman's group, Louise, Fred Dunn, and I can't say enough about Peyton and his leadership of his team, who provided really a very strong vision. We were speaking beforehand about how institutions across the country are really quite different, and UVA had a vision. He referred to it as a dream, and I can't think of a better way to talk about it. If we are lucky enough as architects to work with clients who have vision, we can create great things really in the service of the broader community, and it's hard not to become very excited about working with the community of cancer care because it touches everybody. So with any luck, this will cross over what I think of as the best thing a project can do into a state of grace that provides a healing environment for not only the patients and their families, but also the staff who work there, because it's very, very difficult work. So what we put together today, Roger and I are going to talk about, I think, really the process that went into it. Soon you'll be able to tour through the building and see the results yourself. So we thought the most interesting thing would be to talk about how did we get where we got. Questions?
Somebody has a BlackBerry next to the
That's probably me.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Thanks. Too much feedback. Okay. So without further ado, we've really talking about the Cancer Center, but it covers not just the bricks and mortar or the interiors. Oh, and I should say a great thanks to the interiors team that Peyton mentioned as well. They just did a fantastic job. Yeah, lights would be good down a little bit. So I mentioned as a sub-context, context, identity, organization, and connectivity. All of these things feature into making a place, making a new place within an existing place. So hopefully you'll have a better understanding of that as we go through today. So the academical village is pretty much what everybody thinks of when they think of UVA. And while it was not without influence, it was not the only influence on the project, but certainly was a part of it. But that is the first topic that I've organized the show around, is how do you fit a new building into an existing context, and how do you make that context better? The medical center is the circle or oval down at the bottom of the slide. The grounds of UVA itself are in the shaded tones. The academical village is in the other ellipse. So in a way, there's a very broad context of the campus and its grounds, and there's a great history and tradition that goes along with that. And interestingly, not circled, but the town of Charlottesville is also a participant in this process and how this building fits into the actual physical community. The medical center itself is quite different from the academical village. It's different in scale, it's different in coloration, although there is the shared color of white. It's not used in the sense of white columns here, but quite a large facility that had major influence on our site and helped develop really a point of view about how this project would get developed. The goals of the campus itself, David Newman spent a lot of time talking about trying to fit the building into the context, especially these three in the center: context, sustainability, environment, but all the other things that are part of UVA and making it the great place it is, preserving its heritage, extending its brand, and reinforcing the context while taking on a new sense of sustainability, actually in a way reaching back to an old tradition. So the medical center, you're probably all familiar with. You've spent more time probably in it than I have, although I have been here on and off for about the last 5 years. You can see, and Roger and I will talk about this a bit, JPA, a major approach, a future major approach coming in from the south and east, and of course Lee Street being the major connector. There are a whole series of projects that are taking place around the campus, the South Lawn, the extension of the hospital, the new Battle building up here. But in a way there was no center, so we had also the opportunity in this project to create a new center that could unite several parts of the facility. So this became a big part of what we did, and I think Roger will talk a good bit about that. Again, from the University Architects Office, these were some of the main goals for the project, and you can read them yourself, but they're really big scale thinking, just as the healing environment that Peyton was talking about is very large scale, national scale thinking to go into a new healing facility. So there's our site. We saw this slide before, but it used to be a parking garage. You're probably all familiar with that as well. I'm sorry if you miss it, but you have a better function here. And of course, a new garage has been built to hopefully take away some of the demands there. But you can see that it's very impacted. It's surrounded, in fact, by fairly significant larger buildings. The railroad also that Peyton mentioned. And so how do we create identity within that? How do we connect to the existing facilities? How do we make a new place that can stand on its own, but also be a good citizen? The context, as we mentioned before, ranges from kind of an overscale Jeffersonian or Georgian architecture to the white-clad buildings of the medical center. Necessary elements like the heliport and technology coming and going. A street that was defined previously by landscaping and gateways, which would need to be changed and developed. And how does it join the university context, which was obviously kind of a mental leap to also join the university, the UVA sort of mentality. On top of it, there was an existing building and a new project that was going to take place at the same time as ours, which is an extension of the bed towers of the hospital. So we had to take into consideration, and that's located laminated onto the bed tower, looking actually diagonally across at the UVA Cancer Center. A new facility that helped make staging part of an issue as well, but we also had to think about that in terms of context and materiality views. So here we are. We often start our projects with understanding the greater context, geometries. There's a very clear geometry that is set up by the academic village, east, west, north, south. It starts to get disrupted by topography over time and the necessities and vicissitudes of streets and other boundaries. But we started with that and reaching across and how does it reach out to the medical center, which then deforms by really by the topography and by the town. And with that, we started actually this project, and here's the site, with a study of Lee Street, hand in hand with Roger, and he's going to take over on that.
Thanks, Rick. Well, I think for Rick and I, it's a project about building a home in a way for an existing community, an existing family. When you build a new home, you're, well, in this case, you're actually still in the same neighborhood, but there's a larger neighborhood context to think about in a larger community. And so presciently, the university and the medical center asked us to look at the context at a larger scale and talk about how this new place, this new home is going to be integrated into the university campus as a whole and into the medical center community and family as well. And that really does then, I can find the later one here, focus us around Lee Street and its function now as the principal entrance for the public, at least, to the medical center. And so looking at Lee Street in the public realm that it encompasses and that it defines, thinking about how the dynamics are going to change there for pedestrians as well as for automobiles. Think about the changes that are going to occur in the physical environment in terms of how people perceive the place that are arriving in, sight lines and view corridors back to the old hospital and therefore back to the historic campus. And within that, then thinking about how we can strengthen those relationships and make a new a new place here or strengthen an existing place. So you see here very sketchily, I'm sorry they're a little small, but early studies where we were with Rick and his design team thinking about this corridor and how the nexus of the cancer center, parking, and the front door to the main hospital would all be resolved. Phrases like gateway, placemaking, sight lines, and so on figure into those kinds of conversations fairly significantly, and we're thinking about how are we going to remake the front door. We're going to be making one for the Emily Couric Center, but there's also then a new front door for the hospital complex as a whole. Looking at classical shapes are always simplest. We all react to those. We know how to maneuver in them, whether we're behind the wheel or on foot, and we know how to organize ourselves in them. And so out of that developed a site plan that then influenced how we thought about the landscape for this building. And at the same time, Rick and his design team are organizing the ground floor plan in particular, which is one we're interested in as landscape architects because that's the direct connections that we're concerned with, but also in the upper stories. And the shaping and the massing of the building then precipitates a discussion about, well, what can go on outside the building and how those things can be arranged. A number of points. So here at the intersection of Lee Street and JPA, we have an important sort of prominence in the landscape or an opportunity that the building program didn't occupy, and so landscape could. And invoking a little bit the terrace philosophy of Mr. Jefferson's academical village, the building, as you know, is seated on a very simple terrace plinth, which perhaps provides a little bit of allusion to those traditional elements that we find here at the university. There are 3 or 4 key areas I'm going to use this plan for to describe to you the landscape associated with the center. And here on this rather high, as you've seen out there at JPA Terrace, is, well, it's kind of an overlook at the moment, but eventually there'll be an arborvitae hedge around the little seating area in there, and it's kind of an outdoor private area for individuals, families, small groups, staff, faculty, patients, patient families, what have you. And they'll proceed down there along this terrace in front of the building. Now along that terrace, you can see here, and Rick will talk more about this, there's a meditation chapel on the inside of the building, and Rick and his team have described some great windows there that will provide access to a little viewing garden, which is actually screened off from the main terrace, but provides a little shaded area where we can develop some very interesting plant materials. I mentioned the terrace, which is a kind of main correspondence to our little open area here from the front doors. And up on the roof, there's a roof garden terrace area, again, available for staff, faculty, and patients. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then, and I'll come back to this later, this larger ellipse, which will solve the problems, we hope, of pedestrians, vehicular, and vehicles moving through a very a busy space, an urban intersection, if you like, of buildings and people. Now, when we think about the sort of therapeutic environment opportunities in a place like this, we do have a fairly limited site. So we're looking to not cram, but to squeeze as much out of the landscape as we can. And so that's one of the reasons why the streetscape is fairly limited here. Now, therapy environments, as I've experienced them, generally key around 1 or more of 4 or 5 opportunities. Exercise, aroma, horticultural attributes, and meditation. We don't really on this site have the opportunity to provide a larger exercise kind of environment. But the other 3 we can tackle. And so that's what our therapeutic environments are really focused on. So in this sectional elevation, so this is the front or the south side of the Couric Center, and you see the terrace here coming out to this little promontory with its arborvitae hedge around it. Now that gives you a sense of the scale. Here, the plantings in front. Here, these little sections, sketches give you an idea of the kind of space. It's about 600 or 700 square feet, places for people to sit, and maybe in the future the opportunity for a water feature to help screen the noise from the street and so on. Now, just to give you an idea of the kind of precedent that we're looking at for these spaces, this is the Massey Cancer Center garden down at VCU in Richmond that we completed a few years ago. This is a rooftop outdoor courtyard, probably in some about as big as the spaces that we've just described. And you see this in these photographs, very small, intimate scale, a lot of tactility, access to plants, aroma, color, natural materials, very important in terms of human interaction, and lots of nooks where you can see if people are occupying those places and are far enough away that you can choose to enter or choose to leave those people alone. Those are important considerations in this kind of contained context, if you will. We thought a lot about plant materials and a little bit about that. So in this little meditation area right off the chapel, smaller plants, rich detail. We've got bee balm, coneflower, blue star, if any of those species mean something to you. Probably a palette of 15 or so species in that little nook. Scale, tactility, color, butterflies, those are things that we want in that kind of a space. In the, well, probably misnomered overlook or terrace there, the arborvitae hedge will provide some enclosure, and then some special plants like viburnum that will bring color and aroma, fragrance into that area. And then on the roof, where again we're a little constrained, some bignonia, a great vine that will provide color, fragrance, and so on. Just to finish up then, we are also at the same time thinking about the connections of the center to the hospital. And here we're looking from the roof into the main hospital entrance. Rick will come back to that. And we thought then a lot about how this elliptical space would be shaped at a human scale, accommodate vehicles, a wonderful elm alley here with a high canopy so people can see everywhere and where they're going, but it'll provide shade and some microclimate and some green into those upper stories. And likewise a grove in the center of the ellipse here, which you see in this lower section. And Rick?
Great, Roger. We thought very much of the landscape as part of the architecture. They're really inseparable. And I put this slide in as a transition because it indicates the kind of layers that exist, especially in academical campus, academical village. Layers of trees, layers of columns, figural pieces, platonic solids that rise up around it. We wanted to embrace that in this building. So the street tree planting that Roger just talked about begins one of the layers along the street, then smaller characteristic of planting, then our garden walls, which very much wanted to refer to Jefferson's walls. The large curve at the end not only resolves the intersection of JPA, but recalls a little bit the Serpentine Gardens. And then, of course, there's the official design guidelines of the university, which have very much to do with material, character. There's quite a lot of red and white used in terms of brick and colonnades, but that also gets translated into these void spaces and hard solid shapes that are often surrounded by them. We weren't doing the same kind of building, but we wanted to bring that sensibility into the project. So we spent a lot of time looking at the campus and seeing how these could grow and also embrace the medical center. So we started with sketches such as this. You can see that some of the precedents, the layers of street trees, embracing the strong white paneling of the existing hospital, but in a much smaller scale as a kind of frame to what became an overlook. And we tried to keep circulation in the building to the perimeter, so there was always a sense of context and filtering and layering back as you moved from the waiting areas to clinical areas. And that is where we then introduced our I hesitate to call it a colonnade, but our point of vertical repetition, which is which has to do with the fenestration system, but it embraced the plasticity that's found on the campus. It's a wonderful thing about the University of Virginia in that there's full volumes of expression instead of a flat world, the colonnades, the porticos. So we embraced that in our fenestration and added a layer of environmental protection with our horizontal sunscreens that help manage the light that come in through those spaces and help with the energy efficiency within the building. That element hovers above a transparent area, which again is for bringing light and views into and out of the building, sitting on the plinth that Roger described. And then that whole element is anchored by a very strong brick element which ties into the university, comes to the ground and receives the elements that wrap around and attach to it. You can see from the other end, we didn't have the luxury of space to have a portico that actually was a void, but we developed a double height lobby with a waiting room above it and gave it the expression of a 3-story volume capped with a raised sunscreen to try to capture the sense of a portico of the main campus, but in a new modern way. This also has the benefit of then looking back at the landscaping and at the rest of the medical center. And on top of it is the small garden that Roger mentioned. It will be a delightful little terrace, can be used not only internally by the staff, but also for fundraising and ongoing events. These are some of the sketches as we started reaching around, kind of like a dog chasing its tail, reaching around back to the hospital. We also designed what we're calling the mixing box, which is laminated onto the existing parking structure and also receives a new bridge going over to the hospital and a bridge reaching back to the new parking garage and to the future battle building, which is in design right now. So down the road, we had to consider further connectivity. This would be an education building attached to the cancer center. Could also include pharmacy for patients to pick up their drugs on their way to their car as it attaches to the mixing box. So really thinking of this platonic void or landscape space as a full surround that has both function and an aesthetic point of view, recalling the white plaque, the colonnade, and circulation elements. We look forward someday to that becoming a reality, but we needed to plan for it. So again, kind of references back to the campus. And you can see the power of this very strong form that reaches all the way around to the hospital, which was also added to our contract. While the Smith Group was working on the bed tower above, we added the new lobby and screening so that there's a very strong connectivity, kind of signature to the ground plane experience, which is really important to the visitor and the medical center itself. So here's a good overview of that full loop reaching around, and of course this attaches to the copper covered connectivity that reaches back to the old hospital. In fact, you can see it here. This was a big part of the study, borrowing from materiality, picking up the copper, in fact, of this connector, which occurs occasionally across the campus, not with great frequency, but we thought it worked very well. And it's a wonderful material working with brick and the limestone expression that we have. We have 4 sort of slabs of a beautiful figural sandstone from the region that kind of mark the corners of that building. You'll see that when you visit the site in a little while. And then we have these pavilions with the mixing box and the headpiece of the entry becoming kind of parkers on the north side of the project, whereas the hospital anchors the southeast side. So these are just shots as we developed the project towards the end, these much more realistic impressions. And the trees won't be quite as big when they go in, but down the road we're hoping that there's a very strong integration of that landscape, including a green screen wall to provide filtering of light and some privacy for those spaces at the west end of the building, which receives quite a bit of direct sun. And of course this face looks right back at the existing hospital, so we wanted it to have a strong presentation. Until the educational building is built, there'll be a covered connector with landscaping adjacent to it, reaching back to the parking garage, so that that's a protected walkway to get your car. And behind us in this view, a new bridge, which will go in fairly soon to connect to the hospital and its renovated lobby. So here are just the only construction shots I have. You can begin to see the color, texture, the sense of compressed plasticity, the view from the old hospital. This is the meditation screen wall, which is really thought of as a one room that has an inside portion and an outside portion. This will have hopefully kind of a filtered light through the garden fencing itself and the planting adjacent to it. The room itself is trying to reach out to the senses, stone and wood in a kind of basket weave that provides a sense of cocoon and hopefully peace, so that there's an opportunity for reflection amidst the anxiety of daily life at the Cancer Center. One thing I like very much is the way the building does lead your eye back to the existing hospital, the new building, but referring to its colleagues, and of course the environmental components of sun protection, which will help the energy efficiency of the building. We'll talk more about that a little bit in the future. Now this patient experience, we had some interesting conversations before we met today, and in truth, the architecture has to fit its place, and I think we spent a lot of time making it a new place within the environment of UVA, but the patient experience is where everything comes together, and the theater of the architecture really starts to perform for you, for the medical center, and for the patient and their families, and frankly the staff too, who are under tremendous pressure. So what I wanted to do very quickly was kind of guide you through what Peyton outlined is a touring program, a series of work sessions, research, and the interior experience that led to the character, because really ultimately space has all the throughput and the latest technology, but it needs to have a character that welcomes people to it in all its different representations, and each floor really has a different function, and we think the architecture and the interior architecture needs to reflect that. So this is where we kind of expanded our thinking to the region. And the work tours are a great way, touring the country, to see what have people done elsewhere, what have they done well, what would you like to do differently, not necessarily better, but differently can also be better. So this tour was to the West Coast, and there were lots of things to see at this facility, which we did for UCSD. Contact with nature, quality of light, welcoming experience at the entry, not to mention the quality of care and waiting spaces, and of course the clinical spaces as well. Legacy Salmon Creek up in the northwest. You can actually see a different quality of light right there. This has a very nice meditation room that became a subject of conversation. The quality and materiality of the bed areas, the public spaces, cafe, and patient support areas. Great way to sort of kick the tires, don't you agree, Peyton? OHSU, Dormecker. This project is characterized very strongly by a sense of attention to craft and integration of art programs, which was very, very important to this client and very important to UVA. So all of these things were discussed and then went into these work sessions that Peyton talked about, where key words were developed for developing project goals and really what we wanted people to feel and experience as they came through the space. So palettes were developed. This one is an example one of the Pacific Northwest. I don't think we have dramatic mountains like that here, but the same process was important because it allowed us to look at Virginia, and actually you reach out into West Virginia and pretty broad area to say how can people coming from wherever they come from feel comfortable here. And this became a methodology or a theme for the building. And the mountains, the Piedmont Valley, and the coastal plains were identified as distinct environments within Virginia and in the region, and that became kind of a core to the experience of the project. We tried to think about the culture of each one of those areas, the regions they represent, the demographics of and the age of the various population, and you can see, I mean, Virginia is incredibly diverse. So interior components, these all need to be integrated, which also led to the character that I can't stress the importance of light, both natural and artificial, as well as a sense of color and signage signage, wayfinding. All of these things seem to integrate seamlessly. So the building was divided into 4 areas, and actually there's a 5th floor. I'll talk about that in a minute. The low-grade spaces were attached to the mountain region, and you'll see when you tour through, there's a sensibility that is made apparent. In fact, in the entry lobby, there's a woven wood ceiling which borrows from this kind of experience. The coloration and the kind of sense of peace and spiritual strength come through in this floor. It then translates into a palette of materials and colors, which you'll see in every aspect of it: circulation, the bathrooms, the patient registration areas. The ground floor, the floor you enter, is the entry of this area. It's the Piedmont. So it's attached very much to the vocabulary of brick and white heritage. It also has patient services and wants to be very welcoming. It's that entry floor, so the use of red is very appropriate. It's a very energetic color. We'll talk about that a little bit more. The sense of detail, borrowing elements like this, traditions of wrought iron, went into thinking about the meditation garden screen wall. The 2nd floor goes to a plane, and again, you're lifting up in the building, a greater sense of views out to nature. The color palette shifts, and it also reflects the type of function and uses that take place on this floor. Again, the palette, textures, materiality. Literally, we have walls built of pebbles and sand dollars and patterns in the glass that give us a totally different character. The 3rd floor, which is the last outfitted floor of the building, is the valley language. Again, rolling plains, longer vistas than the mountains. Different sense of coloration. You can see the increased use of pale greens and sages, which are very peaceful colors. This takes place on the clinical floor. Embedded in that regionalism, then, is what we think of on a research basis, really having to do with humanity. And this is an ongoing study. I was looking at these dates, thinking, well, there must be some more recent information. So I'm setting a task for myself to look ahead at more current theory. But color theory is very strong, and we've been very involved with this for decades, actually, as we've got a long tradition of healing environments. And some of this thinking has to do with how do people feel in the space, and how does it contribute to healing, and where should these colors be used. So violet has these kind of characteristics, dignity, and anybody who's gone through cancer care or support can understand the importance of that. Yellow complements to that, provides a different function, works well because it's a little more active and happens to take place in labs and nurse stations. So there's kind of a complement in your experience of the space. Magenta, we'll go through these fairly quickly, but this is interesting reading, and I'm sure ongoing research will tell us more as we do our next projects. So this one, of course, attaches to the Piedmont. It's very interesting when you go into the entry floor, and there's a long red curving wall which leads to the patient support areas and the cafe. I have to say it's very stimulating. So mood is one of the main features, I think, that contributes, because it affects your state of mind, and the state of mind has everything to do with how you deal with disease and your treatment within the disease. A little bit more, probably people are familiar with sacred geometries and Darcy Thompson, growth and form. New research on fractals, and so there's continued growth in that area. We're also doing research now on quality of light, and in fact it's affecting the types of glass we use in different parts of the window, in terms of how it transmits light into different parts of the room, whether it's reflecting up to the ceiling or protecting the patient from direct sunlight, while still providing views out to nature. So these are very influential bits of current research and research-based design. And everybody knows the snowflake pattern, but as architects, we look for common geometries to help link things through. It helps sets up language and characteristics that we can use throughout the buildings. And finally, you move on into materiality and culture and how that's expressed in different places, whether it's in festivals or actual sense of materials. And then what are the characteristics of materials? There have been many advances, additives to materials, but durability, all these things have to last a long time. They're not just picked for their color, but actually how they perform as well. Buildings are very much about performance. So fabrics, upholstery, window treatments, separators between nursing stations and infusion banks. Flooring, what's the acoustic characteristic of the property, and how do they work in terms of infection control? Very, very important. So thinking about all these elements as they come together within the building. And of course, hard spaces, hard surfaces like stone or terrazzo in certain areas, but other easy to clean areas, ACT and vinyls or marmoleums. So it sounds a little mundane, but we have to think about all these things as it comes together to make an overall whole of the building, and then weaving color and light throughout the facility to bring it to life. So what is the patient experience like? So in a way, as part of the tours, the patient experience needs to be diverse. And this is, in a way, how we think about each of the floors. So the ground plane, as you enter, picks up on the coloration of the Piedmont, both in the ground plane and in the wall treatments. It's a floor that also wants to reach back to where you came from, so with wonderful views back to the medical center, to the hospital, with protective landscaping. There also are window treatments that drop down to provide protection from direct glare. This floor has the lobby, patient centers, and diagnostic areas, and there's always a kind of support area and break rooms for staff. So it's a very integrated area that's serving the patient, their families, and the staff. And it's important that each one of those be served. At entry, the quality of light is really important, the sense of warmth and welcoming, materiality. I think we translated that into this building. When you see on your tours, it really looks great with terrazzo floor and stone and wood walls. This is from the West Coast. And then on each floor, this is just an example of the first floor, each floor had an art location plan. So you can see these various dots of different types of art that we recommended in terms of location and what types of art might want to go there. Peyton told me just as we were sitting here that we don't think we're doing quite as much art because the building itself is so artistic that there may be a little less added to it, which is a wonderful compliment. But nonetheless, each floor was thought about how can we complement it, how can we aid the patient visualization process to provide a sense of peacefulness. And I'm sure there are people in the audience who can tell us more about some of the current applications. This floor also has a cafe, kind of a break area, a little bit of educational area to study diseases or just take a break from the stress of many visits. Waiting areas, especially for families. Quality of materials is very, very important in this area, both beautiful and durable. And also functional. How do we provide support and fashion for patients in a friendly kind of retail environment, but without being too gaudy. And this floor also has the meditation room, which lies along the south side with its protective screening, a place for inward thinking and reflection on your own relationship to the spirit. And of course, state-of-the-art equipment is on this floor as part of the diagnostic process. It's very, very important, easy to access, all on one level. The second floor, which actually I'm dropping down, I want to do the entry first. The floor below it is where the vaults are located. Some of the most modern equipment in the world today. In fact, I think we have the second tomotherapy in the world, the only one in this country. And this is a place where a lot of serious treatment takes place. One can go to exam, have that experience, and go to simulation or scanning, or you can go to exam and directly to treatment. So we're trying to reduce patient steps and make things very convenient. Okay. Contact with nature. On that level, it's below grade, so it's done through art and integrated forms of the architecture. Integration of the medical planning to provide stimulating spaces and the latest technology. We like to bring our art into the places where people can actually see it. So when you're lying on your back, bringing art above you. I'm rushing because I think we're getting a little short on time. Sorry about that. Second floor is has 3 programs in it: the women's clinic, women's oncology, pharmacy, and infusion. So these are 3 very important functions, each given us a different character, and also overlooks the lobby below. The waiting spaces, a lot of attention was given to the waiting spaces. In fact, they have even more character than these, with beautiful treatments on the glass, views out over the campus, sense of coloration, privacy for your patient exchanges of information. Different kinds of infusion areas, from private rooms to community, kind of like a sewing circle, all with proper supervision. And the third floor is really the general clinical floor with the modules of clinics and consultation rooms that Peyton talked about previously. A very versatile floor, but also very sensitively laid out. This is the floor just below the roof garden, but it has beautiful views directly across to the central garden that Roger talked about. Again, the integration of technology and contact with nature. I'll try to do this very quickly. I wanted to end with the sustainability portion because it was a big part of the project later in the process. We have several features, from a green roof to sunscreening, all built into the project. This is a diagram when the building was just 4 floors. The university did something very smart, and we built a 5th floor, the 4th above grade floor, which will be something future. We think it will be themed along a more technological or urban kind of theme, depending on what ends up going there. It's actually a very good decision, considering the value of the land, to build more flexible space. There was no LEED goal when we started the project, and at about this point, the university signed to become a participant in a LEED Silver standard for the entire university. So this project had lost the opportunity to design in some of those features. Fortunately, we designed that way as much as we can anyway, and we were able to go through this process considering many of these goals. I'm sorry, I have to go a little fast. And we were able to get to, we think, a LEED Silver level, in part because the university is doing so much on a community-wide basis across the campus. So many of the points that you get have to do with broad institutional policies. Roger's going to
just to hold on to that, because we can keep moving. Just as an example, at this larger scale, the university has a stormwater management plan for the entire campus, working with the medical center. Here you see a diagram that shows some of the micro-urban watersheds that civil engineers, the landscape architects, and the architects have to deal with each of their projects. And you see our little site there circled. So we're thinking, working with the civil engineers, water collection, water quality, cleaning what water comes onto the site, and there are facilities underground and on the surface of the ground that are helping us to do that in our project, and therefore helping all the downstream resources that are affected.
The university participates in a recycling program, which is very important, and the Cancer Center will as well. Collection and separation of all these things, which is that's really a great thing. Location and connectivity within the campus to local services, a quarter-mile and half-mile radius. Proximity to residential areas, so it's actually conceivable to walk to work, as well as access to goods and services nearby. This is the Leadership for Energy and the Environment program. If people aren't familiar with it, it's something that USGBC has put together. We are very solidly in the LEED Silver area. I don't want to talk about it, but the contractor has also voluntarily participated in the program, and it looks like they will be adding some points to that. So it's not inconceivable that we could do better than the silver level. Our current chart looks something like this, and there's a good portion missing for materials, and that will be part of what the contractor contributes. Gilbane is doing a really nice job on that. But what we're basically saying is that the building is going to be very efficient, energy efficient, and participating in a program that I think is leading a healthy life as a building, which I think is important as an example for the medical center. We're definitely running out of time on that, but these are some of the landscape elements that Roger just mentioned that became part of the project. Heat element is very important. I think this space is actually bigger than it really looks. It's going to be a very nice attribute to the building. Lighting and thermal comfort, as I said, we added the sun blinds here. We took away sunscreens on the outside, but added control and comfort provided on the inside. These are some of the changes that took place after the university just decided to join the program. I want to go into too much detail. These are some of the options the contractor has. For instance, bringing harvested wood into the program instead of non-renewable resources. And outreach on the part of the university, which was very smart to make people in the community aware of the project. So this is ongoing external communications and also very strong internal communications. So I think there's been a long anticipation of this project as it started in 1997, and the construction dust has been going on for the last 2.5 years. There's been good communication about what's coming and why it's worth the inconvenience. And finally, fundraising is a big part of moving forward, both providing the current facilities and moving forward with the 5th floor, with the education building, and of course honoring Emily Couric. These will all be recognition of donors at various levels and participation. It's set within a beautiful wood panel wall that you'll see when you go inside. So that's really it. I hope we didn't go too far over, but thanks very much.
I'd like to thank both of you and also Peyton Taylor for this lovely tour, and again, a sort of breathless tour of a very rich facility that we're all looking forward to working with. We have time perhaps for 1 or 2 quick questions, and they'll also be here to chat with you a few minutes afterwards. I'm bringing the mic to you.
Hold on, she's coming. I'm Phyllis Cochera, I'm a clinical psychologist, friend of Emily Couric's, and also a singer. And one of the questions I have is also about the element of sound and how you've accommodated that. And I just want to, before you answer, to piggyback on the fundraising, I'm going to be giving a concert Sunday at 2 o'clock in honor of Emily. It's a benefit for the UVA Cancer Research. Romantic and love songs, and music and sound are definitely a part of the healing. And I wonder how you've taken account of that in your plans for this wonderful, wonderful center, which I am very excited about, and I know Emily would be very proud of and acknowledge you for. So I'd love to hear about that.
Do you have any thoughts on the medical side of that? I can talk a little bit architecturally.
Well, I think it's a partnership, because we do have a music therapy program which is ongoing, and it's been active over the last 12 years or so. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge with some of the reflective surfaces, because we don't have as much carpeting in all the areas, and we have a lot of hard surface. But I'm not sure we're certainly going to continue with the music therapy program. I'm not sure how it will change, because the sound quality will change the nature of the therapy. We do have individual stations for iPods, iPads, and video screens for privacy. They're individualized.
I was just going to say that experientially, cancer centers are usually quiet places and more reflective than outgoing. I love the idea of integrated music or sound programs. I don't remember that as being a part of the program per se, meaning a special place for it. But it also sounds like a fantastic area of research to bring that further into the program. Many of the, we were talking about this actually over coffee earlier, that part of the vision and so much good thinking went into the project ahead of time, that these thoughts about providing places, really being the theater for healing, really comes through the advanced thinking that the UVA did. And we really just try to provide environments where there's flexibility and different events like this could happen. Actually that the waiting space on the 4th floor next to the garden would be a great place for music or participatory events. Thanks for that question. That's,
And the auditorium was actually moved out and moved to the education building to make room for imaging facilities that we needed. So it's still in the plan, but in the next building.
So we'll have part 3 in a few years. But again, thank you so much, and they will be available for your questions down here. Please join us next week, the 16th of February, for Jeff Goldsmith from Health Futures Incorporated and the Department of Public Health Sciences. He'll be giving us an up-to-the-minute view of beyond health reform, the implications for academic medicine. So where are we as an academic health center with respect to the healthcare reform that is ongoing? Thank you all so much.